Good morning. My name is Alexis Guinbertier. I'll be your speaker presenter this morning. First, thank you for the good turnout on a Thursday. I see a few of you have suitcases. I'm told by the locals that the Austin airport doesn't expect that much traffic usually, and that the security lines might be long. So I'm flying myself at 3 o'clock, and just after this, I'm heading out. So with that, today's session is turning any dashboard into a command database. What this is about, this is a developer track at the advanced level. So I'm going to get technical on you. I'm going to show you exactly how the sausage is made. And the sausage we're going to make is a dashboard which you can use to, well, a dashboard with commenting features, right? And I'll go straight into a demo to show you what I'm talking about. Right? I have to. So we have the infamous Superstore. Anybody has seen this chart before, right? That was day one at Tableau. So we have sales by region and by product subcategories. The length of the bar is the sales amount, and the color is profit, right? And as you would expect, your eye is drawn to tables in the East because we're losing money right here. Now, what's nice here is I see there's a little asterisk, right? You see this little star here? And that tells me that there is a comment or an annotation attached to this particular mark, right? So instead of going ahead and calling the manager of sales for tables in the East and telling them they're not doing a good job, first I'm going to check what's been said. And here it says tables in the East are actually fine. We are actively buying this market by voluntarily discounting heavily, okay? So what we're seeing here in action is that the data is telling you one thing, but other users add a layer, right? So your understanding of what's going on is increased. So that's very good. We see there's another place here, bookcases in Central. And I'll also notice that Central tables are not doing well. So what I'll do is add my own comment here. And you saw this dashboard action. And to the right, I have a form where I'm able to add my own comment. Interested in knowing more about why we are losing money here. Are we also actively buying this market? Right, and as soon as I create this comment, the dashboard is refreshed, and I can see this little comment appear right here. So that all the users who come in will immediately know that what's happening. Furthermore, as I see all the comments below my dashboard, and as I hover, I can see which mark on this particular dashboard this comment is referring to. Right, so it's very easy for me to consume those comments. Contrast this with what we have today, which is not much. Essentially, what we have in Tableau Server are, sorry, let's go here. We have regular comments, but they're not threaded. They're not attached to marks. And so it's kind of difficult to use, right? You have to look through the comments to see if somebody said something about tables in the East. So the original use case was about 3 years ago. I had an asset manager who said, well, I have fund managers, and they have to comment on the composition of the funds. And those comments, I really need to manage them. It's something that's going to make it all the way through to the printed document, maybe. I have to keep track of those. So I need those in my own database. I don't want it into Tableau's repository. So that's what I came up with to help them out. So what we'll do today is essentially build this together. I'll use Tableau Desktop to build this dashboard, and I'm going to use Ruby on Rails as a web application for the form on the right, right? But you could be using any web application out there, framework. You could be using Scala and Play. You could be using JSP, Struts. You could be using ColdFusion. And by the way, how many of you are developers or web developers in the room? Okay, the left side. And how about business users who have friends in IT? All right. So there'll be some elements for both groups. But the goal for me is to show you exactly how it's done so that hopefully if things go according to plan, we'll run into problems, technical issues, and then we're going to fix them. And so when you go back home and implement something like this, you'll know exactly what to do, okay? All right, so we talked about the demo itself. Let's review now what it's going to take to build this together. What does it take to mash Tableau with a web application? So in our case, we have the data coming from, I called it data. It's actually Superstore in our own demonstration. And we'll have the comments stored in a separate database. In my case here, I'll use SQL Server to store the comments. And then on the right, we have the comments app, and in my case, I'll use Ruby on Rails. You can also deploy this on Tableau Server, and it's basically the same setup, except that the end user's browser here is going to get the analytic from Tableau Server and the forms on the right directly from the commenting application. So I chose to use Ruby on Rails. I'll give you the basics. We're not going to spend a lot of time coding in Ruby on Rails. It's a very easy-to-use framework, but I'll give you the basics. Ruby on Rails is a web application framework. The language is Ruby. The framework is Rails. And it follows the model view controller way of doing, which is essentially you have the controller handling the orchestrating the application, right, and doing the computing. But fetching the data is done through the model. So the model is going to look after data integrity, what happens when you create a new comment, what happens when you destroy a comment, in terms of how you handle the database itself. And then finally, you have on the right the views, which is what you render on the browser, right? In front of all this, you have the routes. And the routes are the entry points into your application. Think of them as URLs, or the way URLs look. And we'll be tweaking those a little bit. Any question on that, or what we're set out to do? No? Very good. So let's jump in. So let's go ahead and start right with our Ruby on Rails application. And what I've done here, I'll zoom in so that everybody can read what's going on. I've created a new Rails application just by typing Rails new comments. And Rails has created for me all these folders, essentially a skeleton of an application. But right now it's doing nothing. So what we'll do next is create a scaffold. A scaffold is going to be a model and all the controllers and views that we need to create those models. So in our case, we want to store comments, right? So I'll do a Rails. Can everybody read? We've got a pretty good setup today, but so Rails generates scaffold, and I'll call this comment. And what we want to store in our database, we want the report name, because we might use this application for a report, but we might use it across multiple reports, right? So we want to be able to separate comments by report, right? So report will be a string. Author is going to be a string. And we need a couple of dimensions. Depending on the report we're going to attach our comments to, those dimensions might be different, right? So I'll give them a generic name. Instead of putting here region and subcategory, I'll put dim1 and dim2. And depending on the report we want to work with, we'll use those in different ways. So dim1, dim2 are strings. And then finally, we want to store the comment itself, which is, again, going to be a string. Finally, I'll add just one more field to show you that this is really easy to expand the scope of what we're doing here. We'll call this mark data as suspect. That's going to be a Boolean, right? Some applications, you might want to have people go through the data and check that it's correct, right? So here with this commenting, we'll have this checkbox just to say, well, this is I'm not sure that the data is correct. So let's go ahead and do that. Oh, I have to go into the folder first before I can do my scaffold. Here we go. Let's generate scaffold. I apologize for this. Let's just start again. cd commands tc. We'll run a scaffold. We'll call it comment. We'll put an author, a report, dimension 1, dimension 2, and then the comment itself, and then finally a flag. Let's just call it flag for speed. Well, so I said we wanted to run into technical problems. I was not hoping to run into this one. Home driver path may be set and point to a directory runtime errors. All right, that's okay. We're not going to spend much time on Rails. I have a working application here. And so what we'll do is use the working application to build our dashboard. But essentially, once you've created your scaffold, this is what happens. You go to localhost 3000. This is your Rails application. And Rails has generated for you a scaffold. In the scaffold, you have a number of features. You have the list of comments. And here we have already a number of comments existing. You have a form. All of this is coming out of the box, right? As soon as you create a scaffold, you get a form to create a new comment. And you get also a URL to destroy a particular comment, as well as one to edit a comment. So all of this, as soon as you've done a scaffold, Rails provides for you. So now that we have this sample web application, we'll go ahead and start Tableau and create that dashboard and hook it up to this web application. All right, so in our case, we'll start with Superstore. Let's take a look at sales by region, subcategory. And let's colorize these by profit. Very good. And now I want to go and fetch the comments from the database, right? And in this case, you could do it two ways. Since this is Tableau 10, we could join the data from the comments database with my own data. But this could lead to problems like duplicating rows, where if we had multiple comments for tables in the East, I would have a duplication of my sales rows, right? And you can deal with that with LODs. But in my case, I think here a better solution is to blend the data in. So to blend, we'll go ahead and connect to a new data source. Let's connect to SQL Server. And it's on my local machine. Let's go and find the comments database. And here we have the comments table. And if I update here, I see that I have already a few comments in my database. We have a report, dim1, dim2, author, comment. And we have 3 extra columns that I did not ask for, but these are built in Rails, which is the ID, the date of creation, and the last time this particular row was updated. I don't have to worry about those. This is all taken care of by the framework. Very good. So now that we have those 2 data sources, we simply want to blend. So let's say I want to blend here on region and subcategory. One way to do that would be to go ahead and edit relationships. Everybody familiar with blending? Yeah. Or I find it easier to simply rename the field. So this would be region, and this would be subcategory. And I know that I have renamed them properly because I have this little link here that shows that we are going to blend. Very good. So now I have my Superstore data. I have my comments coming from a secondary data source. What I'll do here is just add number of records in label. And instantly, I see that I have 2 comments attached to tables in the east, 1 attached to central, and 1 attached to envelopes in the west. Very good. The next thing I'll do here is probably add the comment itself into the tooltip. Right? And sometimes we have multiple comments. I'll get a star here because this is blending, right? And so it's at an aggregate level. But when I have a single comment, I'll get the comment right here in the tooltip, which is good. So let's go ahead and put this comment below. And say number of comments. Very good. So now as I hover my mouse, I see that I have 2 comments here. I have why should investigate why we are losing money here. I don't know that it's proper English. Interested in knowing more, et cetera, et cetera. So we have our comments right here in the visualization and easy to access. Now, what about this one where we have multiple comments? The way I'm going to address this is by having a separate view where we have all the comments. Right? So let's go ahead and put the comment ID, the author, and then the comment itself. And the comment itself, I can put it in text right here. And this is going to be the list of comments. Right? And the rest is simple. Let's go ahead and build a dashboard. Let's put the sales on top. Let's put the comments below. And what we'll do is use this use as filter feature so that as soon as I click on this particular bar, I see below the 2 comments that belong to this particular mark. Right? And if there's no comment, this is going to be empty. We might want to keep this list displaying. You know, there's an option in the dashboard actions where you can exclude all values if you haven't selected anything. I would keep all the comments displaying here just in case some comments become orphans. Right? Let's say the data moves. There's no more sales of table in the east, or region gets renamed. The blending wouldn't happen anymore, but I would still see those comments below. And then finally, we want to add a highlight here to go from our comments to the sales using every field possible. And I want this to happen as soon as I hover my mouse. Highlight mark for this comment. So now I know that this particular and here I have more comments than I want. I would probably want to filter these using a data source filter and only keep the comments for this particular report. Right, and I think this is going to be profitability. All right, so now we can view the comments. We still can't create new comments. So what we'll do is bring in a web page component to the right. And the web page component is going to display by default our welcome page in our Rails application. I missed a 0. By default, Rails is running on port 3000. And to allow the end user to create a new comment, I'll create another dashboard action, and I'll call it, this has got to be a URL action, and I'll call it create new comment. All right, so a URL action in Tableau, if you have a web page component, it's going to display that page in the web page component. If you don't have one, it's going to open a browser for you. Or if you're in Tableau server, a new tab. Right? So in our case, we have a web page component right here. So triggering this URL is going to open the new comment form. The URL is going to be localhost / comments / new. And we'll put this as a menu item. And this is only something that you get on the sales analytic. Right? So if I click here, I can create a new comment, and I can go ahead and type what I want. Now, the problem here is, do you really want the end user to type the name of the report, the dimension 1, dimension 2, and author? Probably not, right? You'd like to have those pre-filled. So to do that, we'll do a couple of things. First, we'll need the username. And the username is not directly available in the dashboard action. We have to do something first, which is create a calculated field. And I'll call it username, and all it's going to return is the current username. Username here is the name of the user currently logged into Tableau server. And at this point, I'm logged as administrator. Right? So I have a new username field, and I'll add this into the level of detail. I don't need to display it. I just need to have it here in context. So now that we have this, let's go and tweak the dashboard action. And we're going to pass this into the form by using author equals username. All right, so let's try this. Let's go ahead and create a new comment. And now admin has been filled in for me. Now, if you're going to go back home and implement this with Ruby on Rails, one thing you need to know is that by default, Ruby on Rails will not let you get data into a form by means of URLs. Okay? You'll have to authorize this. And the way to do it, and this file, this resource file, is part of the package you'll get after this session. You'll want to add this into the Rails controller, right? Which essentially says, let's add to the new comment we just created all the attributes you find coming from the URL, and we'll allow report, dim1, dim2, and author to come in. All right, so let's go back to Tableau. So we've added the author. Now we want to add the additional two, which are dimension 1 and dimension 2. So we'll do that. dim1 equals region, and dim2 equals subcategory. And finally, we want to pass the report name, which is a constant, and we'll call the report profitability. Very good. So now we should be able to create a new comment here for bookcases in the East. Everything is pre-filled. And you could hide those right in the form. Maybe the end user doesn't need to see those fields. I just keep them here for illustration purposes. And so let's go ahead and type bookcases in the East. And just create that comment. OK, so we've created the comment. Now, as an end user in Tableau Desktop, I have to go ahead and refresh that secondary source. And this is one of the hurdles or one of the limitations today, which is if you're going to deploy these for Tableau Desktop users, they'll have to know that they have to go to that comments data source, hit F5, and get all the new comments in. If they were just doing F5 here while looking at the sales data, the secondary source is not refreshed. So there's a little bit of training you'll have to do here. There's no workaround at the moment. On the web, we'll see that there are a few solutions. All right, so now let's do the same for editing and deleting comments. So I'll go ahead and create new dashboard actions for those. Sorry, not a filter. This is a URL action. And we'll call it delete this comment. This is going to be available only on the list of comments below. And we'll go to localhost 3000 comments / the comment ID. And these are the routes I was referring to, right? These are coming out of the box when we created the Rails scaffold. Rails provide all those URLs. So comments /ID /destroy. And we'll go ahead and test this. So let's delete bookcases in the east. All right, and we get to a page that says command was successfully destroyed, and let's hit F5. Very good. And finally, we want to add the ability to edit comments. So once again, URL filter, sorry, URL action, edit this comment. It's going to be available on the comment list, and we'll do a localhost comments, the comment ID, and finally edit. And that's going to be available on the menu as well. And so let me backtrack a little bit to edit comment, and then just update. Very good. So let me summarize a little bit what we've done so far. We have mashed up Tableau with a web application. And so on the left, we have data coming from Superstore, in our case. We have, at the bottom, the list of comments coming from SQL Server. We have used blending to display the comments right here on the data. And we have created a web page component on the right, which we call by means of dashboard URL actions. Now, again, for those of you who are going to implement this using Ruby on Rails, these are the routes that are built in when you create a scaffold, right? So if you go to /comments, you get the list of all the comments. If you go to /comments/new, you get the new form. If you go to comment/an identifier, you'll be able to edit a comment. Sorry, display a comment, and then /edit, you're going to get the form to edit it. The one you don't get is the destroy URL. Essentially, the scaffold does provide one, but it's for those of you who are familiar with HTTP, you can access it through an HTTP delete verb, not a get verb. And from Tableau Desktop and Tableau Server, the only URL actions you can trigger are get HTTP requests. So what I did is I went ahead in Ruby on Rails, and I created a new route which leads to the same place, which leads to the same comment destroy method. And I made it a get route. So you might have to do that depending on which framework you use. Just make sure that all your actions are available through get requests. All right, so this application is almost complete. We have something that's workable in Tableau Desktop, but let's go ahead and publish it to Tableau Server now. And call it dashboard with comments Thursday. And we'll make it available to my Tableau Server users. And let's try and use it. Very good. OK, so it's already available on Tableau Server. I have a working application. Now here, again, it does not refresh by itself. I have to train my users to click on refresh this button here before I can see comments appear. OK, so that's something else you have to keep in mind. If you stay within the Tableau Server environment, you'll have to train your users to hit refresh right here. What we'll do is we're going to use JavaScript, the JavaScript API of Tableau, to put this dashboard into a separate web page and automate the refresh of that dashboard whenever something happens on the Rails side. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to use in my Rails application controller. So let's go ahead and open the existing one. Right, I'm going to create a new method in my controller. So here you'll see the existing ones, index, which lists all the commands. This is to display a particular command. This is to create a new one, etc. In my case, I'm going to display the dashboard, and I'll call it dashboard 2. Right? And I'm going to do nothing in terms of treatment. All I want is to have a method here. Now, to be able to access this method, I want to have a route to get to it. So I'll go into the config folder, display the routes, and create a new route that lets the dashboard 2 URL go through and get to my dashboard 2 method. Okay? So right now, I should be able to get to this page. It's actually going to complain because I don't have a view yet. Right? So if I go to dashboard 2 right here, no, localhost, dashboard 2. It's complaining because I don't have a view yet. So let's create one together. And to create a new view, I'll just say hello world, just to verify that we put the file in the right place. And let's save it into the views folder for the commands controller. And let's call it the same name, dashboard2.html.erb. Again, this is all specific to Ruby on Rails. With your own web page, it's going to look a little bit different. No route matches get dashboard 2. Thank you. That works better. Thank you for this. So we have a view now which says hello world. What I want to do here is use the JavaScript API sample. So if you go to the JavaScript API documentation on Tableau.com, the first example you'll see is actually this. Right? It's a simple HTML page that's going to load a particular visualization. So we'll use that as a framework to start. And what it does, at the top here, it's loading the JavaScript API, right? The second thing we do here is create a div element in our HTML document, and we call it this container. And finally, we run a little bit of JavaScript. What happens here is we are creating first a global variable. And that's the trick here. You want to create a global variable to store your Tableau visualization. And in this function here, we're going to first find the container we just created by a getElementById. And two, we're going to load the visualization into it and store the result into this global vis variable. So it's not going to do much except just load this particular visualization. Now let's go and find out the URL of our dashboard with comments Thursday. If we go to share, Tableau gives us the URL to it. And we can just paste it here. We can remove all those options here, which I don't really care about. All right, so let's try this now. This is our web page that said hello world. And now it's loading our dashboard with comments. Now, we don't have anything outside of this, which is fine for today's example. So now what we want to do is whenever we create a new comment, notice that it's already done here in this example. But we're going to this message window, which says comment was successfully created. So I'll show you what happens here. What happens is when you go to this view, we have here a little bit of JavaScript that's going to load, that's going to refresh our dashboard. So whenever we have a message at the top that says comment created or comment deleted or anything happen in the database, we'll want to execute this particular JavaScript. And all it does, it's extremely simple. It goes to the top level window of our browser, finds the top level V's variable that we created early on, and then it's going to call on it this refresh data function, so that as soon as we delete the comment, we refresh the dashboard for the end user. And so now we have something that's very easy to use for our end users. It's something you can embed into another application, et cetera, et cetera. Any question on what we've done so far? Yes?
So, you actually created comments for that particular region, right? And if there's a filter for the time action, right, seeing this month, last month, how does the comment get attached to a time limit?
Good question. So the question is, what if we had a filter, a time filter, for instance, and we were looking at sales for a particular quarter. Now we're moving on to another quarter. How do we keep track of which filter we were on, right? Which time period? So the answer is right now we don't. We only attach the comment to 2 dimensions. In our case, we chose to rig it and attach it to region and subcategory. But we could bring the date at a quarter level in level of detail of this visualization. Okay. And we'd want to have in our comment application in the model, remember when I created the scaffold, we'd want to have additional fields, right? And you want to cater for as many fields as you need to cover all your use cases, right? So maybe you have dim1, dim2, dim3, dim4, and you may use only 2 of those. Maybe you'll have date 1, date 2, date 3, et cetera, et cetera. Any other question on what we've done? Yes?
Does this still work on the views that are created for specific users on Tableau server?
Will this work with existing views that you have in your Tableau server, is the question?
No, not just, because this is the original view, just in case I create separate views for each user, and will this work on each of those views as well?
And by views for your end users, do you mean that you've secured your dashboard and are showing them different slices of the data? Or are you referring to user views where you customize the filters?
Something like user views where I customize based on some filters.
Uh-huh.
Suppose I put in those filters in the dimensions, would it sync up? And just in case I'm the admin,
Mm-hmm.
and I have the original view which would have inputs from all the users, will I still be able to see as a sync up of all the comments?
Yeah, I mean, so the question is, can you refine a little bit the context, essentially, right? You want to attach comments, but taking care of some context that you have set up already, where different users see different views. Yes, I think it's a question close to the previous one, which is you might want to add into your comment model additional dimensions so that you can make sure that you're capturing the context at the right level. Right? So maybe you have additional filters that define what end users can see. You'll want to capture that into your comment model.
How would you take into account multiple comments like versioning? And how would you be able to allow a user to check a box and say this is the final comment or something?
Mm-hmm. Yes, good question. So the question is, how would you handle a situation where you want multiple versions of a comment and maybe mark one as the final one? Mm-hmm. So for the timestamp, we're lucky when we're using Ruby on Rails because the create timestamp and the last updated timestamp are built in, right? So I know if I look at my list of comments right here, let's go back to Tableau Desktop. I have those 2 fields right here, created at, and we can put it at the month, day, year, and we have the updated at the month, day, year. So we'd be able here to figure out by means of level of detail calculations, which is the comment for a particular user on a particular mark. That's the most recent one. So you could solve this question with an LOD calculation. That would be one way. The other way would be to have a checkbox in your comment form that says final. So, I mean, in Ruby on Rails, it's quite simple. You just add a new column in your model, and that would render as a checkbox. In the frameworks that you use, it might be different. But I would add a checkbox saying this is final. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yeah.
Have you had any, you taken any special precautions to prevent server-side or browser-side caching so that the single call to refresh actually refreshes? Because I've implemented this and had trouble with a single call to refresh actually doing it every time reliably.
Okay. Well, this might be possibly a product issue if you're not getting, I mean, when you click on the refresh button or you call that JavaScript function, Tableau is going to read the data, trigger a new query all the way to the database. I mean, the cache, the data cache is wiped out for this particular session. We're going all the way to the database, all the way to the extract, if there's an extract. It's not going to refresh the extract. So maybe we can talk about this after this session and investigate why this is happening. But I haven't had an issue with refreshing the data. Now, this brings another limitation, which is when you use a URL action. Let's say I start typing here, and I call it again, nothing's happening. And so that's a separate problem, but it's somewhat connected. That's because Tableau believes that we are already on this URL, on this web page component. So it's not going to do anything. Even if I had filled this form and I had displayed the result. What you want to make sure here, if you want to let the user enter multiple commands on the same mark, is that there's a client-side redirect, which I've already implemented here. It's taking you to another place by means of a client-side redirect. And then Tableau knows that we are on a different URL now. So if I create a new comment, it will work. Well, actually, on this sample, I'm not sure I have implemented it. So that's something to keep in mind. I have this in the slides as the last remarks on technical things to know about. Any other question?
So from the security perspective, how can I prevent somebody just get hold of that URL, not be actually my Tableau user, just get hold of URL and do something?
Sure. The question is, how do you secure this? Very good question. So I can talk about Ruby on Rails, but in your web framework, it might be different. What you'll want to do is authenticate your users in your web application and keep them in this session, right? So we know that Alexi is Alexi on this particular web page. And you'll also want to do a single sign-on to Tableau server, right? And there's multiple methods to do that. Let's assume you have Active Directory, right? So in the Active Directory world, it's going to be simple. Your browser is going to provide both your web framework and Tableau server with who you are, right? That's a feature of Active Directory. If you use SAML as an identity provider, you'll want to sign your end users into your web app, and then automatically they'll be also signed in Tableau server if Tableau server is configured for SAML. And finally, we have a mechanism for all the other use cases, which is called trusted tickets, where you would first authenticate the user in your web application, and subsequently you would ask for a ticket. So let's say Alexi is coming in. Alexi would be signed into this web application, and the web application would ask for a token from Tableau server for Alexi. Tableau server would give it without any password, just because it trusts your application. That token, you can insert it into the URL right here. And then once your browser calls Tableau server, you'll get an instant session thanks to this ticket. So in other words, the short answer is there are multiple ways to achieve that, but we're talking about single sign-on so that first you know who is in your application, right? Subsequently, you might stop here. Sometimes it's good enough to know who is doing the creation of comments, right? Because who would want to create thousands of comments if their name is attached to it, right? So that might be sufficient. If you wanted to prevent somebody from ever creating a comment from outside the application, there are additional techniques. You could hash the dimension 1 and dimension 2 elements that go into the form and verify that they haven't been tampered with. There's different techniques, but this is more like a web application security question at that point.
Are there any plans to add this as a built-in feature in future releases?
Yeah, so we're definitely improving Tableau Server. You've seen Francois on, was it Tuesday morning? He showed that we are adding discussions to Tableau Server. So you'll be able to select marks and then have a discussion on the side, right? So it's not exactly the same as this because the discussions are not displayed right here in the data, but it does improve collaboration, definitely. So we're improving the product. Going through the effort of doing all this is worth it if you have something that needs to be closer to your business use case. Right? If it's not just commenting, but you want to mark the data, you have a business process where several folks have to mark this data as validated, this kind of thing. If it's just about collaboration and commenting, I would sit back and wait for maybe 6 months. Yes?
In the same vein of security, I can imagine a lot of ways that you could prevent people from seeing comments unless it's within their purview based on filtering and different grouping and sets. But how could you prevent with actions people from editing or deleting comments except things that they should be able to edit or delete? And that you just destroyed a comment made me very nervous.
Okay. Yes, good question. So here, we're not doing any verification on the destroy method in Ruby on Rails. I would
Would it all be in the app? Or
yes.
not in Tableau?
So Tableau will pass the current user, and in that destroy method, you might want to check that the comment you're about to destroy belongs to the current user, right? If not, do nothing. Yes, that would be in the web application.
So if you wanted to send somebody this web page, for example, do they have necessarily, should it be in the same place as the comments database, or can somebody get this web page, they don't even have the data access to the database, they don't get the database, just the comments published? Can it be a local comments database, but I'm actually publishing the dashboard to a central location?
The question is whether you can have the comment be local to your organization, but Tableau Server is maybe in another location managed by another team.
Yeah.
Why not?
So I don't need to have the comments in a server. Can it be in a local server, but not in like an enterprise server?
Yes, I mean, if you're deploying this to Tableau Server, you'll want Tableau Server to have line of sight to your database.
But not the individual users.
Correct, but not individual users. So that sounds workable. Yes?
Do you have to have this Ruby on your server?
It doesn't have to be on the Tableau server. I would not recommend putting that on Tableau server. I would recommend putting it somewhere else. You could, in a lot of use cases, you can deploy these on Amazon or somewhere in the cloud because the data you store, especially if it's just flags, it doesn't matter if somebody else gets their hand on it, right? If you store only IDs and flags, you could run this application in the cloud safely. Yep, go ahead.
Question. When you did the right click to create a comment, there was a button. Is that from Ruby, or did you have to add something to your bits? It says, when you're done putting a comment, it says create comment. Not there.
This one here, all this form comes out of the box with Ruby on Rails. Once you create a scaffold, it creates for you that form.
So you didn't have to design it.
I did not have to design any of that. So that's why I chose Ruby on Rails for today, because it's really, really quick to develop that kind of application.
With the dimensions there, I know in the scaffold you called it div1.
Mhm.
Leave it flexible for lots of different reports, but having a bunch of these for specific reports, if you wanted the dimension to be region and subproduct, subcategory, you just create it like that.
Yes, so the question is,
You can't control. There's not like
No, it auto-populated by the action, right? Like the customer's not
yeah, it
filling that out.
automatically comes across, but it's dim1 and dim2 versus region and subcategory.
Yes.
Can you do an alias in Ruby or would you just
oh, you mean so that it doesn't show dim1 and dim2 here, but something?
because
Sure. Yes. So the question is, okay, here we have a form, but it's kind of odd for the end user because it says dim1 and dim2. It's a bit confusing when it's actually region and subcategory. Could we tweak Ruby on Rails to display region and subcategory? The answer is yes. We would pass into that, by means of URL, the name of the field you want to display. And then in the form code, we'd use those parameters coming from the URL. That's one way. The other way is just to hide all of these. I mean, do you really need to know? As soon as you click somewhere, you know where you clicked. It's actually still highlighted, right, where you clicked. It's south and machines. So you could just hide those fields as well. Did that answer your question? Okay, good. Yes?
Can I restrict the users who put in comments?
Could you restrict the users who can put in comments?
Just in case, like, there are 20 people who are using the dashboard, I would want only 2 people to be able to put in comments.
Mhm.
Everybody.
So we don't have a mean. That's a good question. The question is, can we restrict who can enter comments depending on the groups they belong to or their profile? The answer now is no. I mean, we don't have a means to hide these action for particular users.
It would still be available on their view.
Yes.
But, would there be anything on code, like, if you could give the user ID and the password, something like a default user ID and password?
Sure. I mean, we could render ineffective. We could keep it here and render it ineffective. We could create a calculation in Tableau desktop where we say if is member off, and the group would be called people who can create comments. And then here construct the URL, right? Else, send them to Google, or just display an error page. Display an error page that says you're not allowed. So that would be one way. They wouldn't be able to create comments unless they knew the URL. So the better way to secure it would be to prevent them altogether from accessing the web app in the first place by any means.
Would this be available on the view? I mean, if I give somebody only the view access, would they still be able to put a comment, or I'll have to give them an edit access? On the laptop?
The view would be sufficient here in this case. As soon as you can view the dashboard, you have access to all this. Yeah.
So I have a question. If I'm to deploy this application to potentially 100 users, then they may add at the same time. Probably won't be add comment because the comment doesn't matter. But what if it's like I give them access to turn either on and off, but 100 people may access it and maybe on the same time,
Mhm.
and make sure that they still get their result, not being interfered by others, like multiple people doing on this same entry, potentially multiple times.
Mhm.
How do I handle that?
What is the concern? So the question is, how do I handle if I have a lot of potentially concurrent users, people doing the same things at the same time? What is the concern? Is the concern for you that somebody would be creating a comment at the same time saying the same thing?
Like added comment. A lot of people have a lot to say. People A want to say something, people B want to say something. They supposedly all ending in one entry.
Mhm.
How would that handle like people like concurrent entry and also potentially one delete the other and stuff? I don't know.
Sure. So one way to do that would be maybe, and we discussed that, is how to secure, meaning you can only delete your own comments or edit your own comments. That would require verifying that the user asking to do the operation is the same as the currently logged in one. Sorry, the owner of the comment is the same as the currently logged user. That would be one way to handle it. The default behavior for Ruby on Rails is you can have multiple people come in and edit, and the last one wins, right? The last one to press the save button will win, and that's the last command that will be there. So depending on what you want to achieve, it's going to require different things in the web application design. Either you secure by user and you cannot edit somebody else, or people can overwrite each other, possibly. All right, I have just a few things I want to review, and I'll show you another use case for a write-back application. So deployment pitfalls, I'm not going to go into details. These are very fine technical issues you might run into. You'll have the slides, so give that. If you're a developer, that's something you'll want to take with you. If you're a business user, you'll want to give this to your IT team. One pitfall is X-frame options. This is a security feature of your browser which will not display an application unless the frames come from the same place, right? So you want to make sure that your application, your comments application, does not use this security feature. Another one is refreshing the blended data. We talked about it, right? You have to know that you, as a desktop user, you have to go to the secondary source and refresh. We've seen the options here. Train the end user is one. Consume from Tableau server is another one. Even better is embed and use JavaScript to do the refresh. Another pitfall is HTTPS. You develop an application that's HTTP. You embed it into a Tableau server that's HTTPS. That won't work. Same reason. The browsers, by default, don't want you to be misled, right? Thinking you're in an HTTPS connection, but part of the screen is actually coming from an HTTP connection. So these are the solutions. You can put your application behind a proxy or disable the security checkings in the browser. And then this one we talked about, the server-side redirects, so that you can create multiple comments on the same mark, one after the other. So the last thing I want to do, if we have another minute, is see another write-back example. This is a forecasting tool. And what I want to give you here is some ideas on how to use this. Essentially, this is a forecasting application. And here, let's say we're Sean Montelese, and we're forecasting for our boss, which are the opportunities that I'm going to close this particular month, this particular second month of the quarter, this end of quarter, and next quarter, right? So I'll say that this particular op, I'll close it in April, best case, likely in May, and definitely by the end of Q2, right? So I'm going through my data, and I just say push. This one, there's no chance. I'm not going to close it. And this one is likely, and commit, right? So what I'm doing here is we're starting in Tableau Desktop, Tableau Analytic, and then we're doing some write-back. And this is kind of a what-if analysis, if you want, right? So now we go into the forecast report. The data is already available. I'll just refresh. And now I can see my sales forecast that's been filled in by Sean. And in this case, the use case goes a bit beyond, where the managers can also override what the sales reps do. So there's tons of write-back use cases out there, which will use the same techniques we use today for the comments application. Hopefully you found it valuable. If you want to take a minute or two, please go to the app and then provide feedback on the session. Thank you very much.